the old scaffolding's gone.
Oh, has it? I did, right.
You didn't
Oh.
notice?
I didn't, off the end here.
Yeah.
Right. It's been there a long time, isn't it? Okay, that's good. Did you notice the new chair?
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, fancy.
Good evening, all. Anyone here for the first time? Special welcome to you all. So, my name is Gen Kelsang Talopa. Again, just means teacher. And Kelsang means fortunate one. And Talopa means sesame seed person. So, what we do tonight? Why is that so funny? Well, Tilo is the Sanskrit name for sesame seed, and Pa just means male person. But it's named after a great early 11th century yogi and teacher, and very famous. And so I'm very happy to be a fortunate sesame seed person. So last week we were talking about moral discipline, and the plan was to talk about moral discipline and concentration, but we didn't get around to concentration. So I'm going to begin with a meditation after we do liberating prayer. Liberating prayer is a prayer written by my teacher, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, about 13 years ago. And it's a prayer that recognizes the good qualities of the founder of Buddhism, Buddha Shakyamuni, who found his own way out of suffering, realizing that every living being is experiencing suffering on a daily basis. And it's not just for one lifetime. You know, our mind is like a continuum. There's no beginning and no end. Whereas our body is finite. But when we die, our mind just continues into its next life. But the problem is, as we go from life to life, we take with us the causes of suffering. And so, until we remove the causes of suffering from our own mind, that's where they are. The causes of suffering lie within our own mind, and they're called delusions, like anger, like jealousy, like uncontrolled desires. You got any of those? You been dealt with any of those? Yeah. So what happens when we act upon those delusions? We tend to create suffering, both for ourselves and for other people. So for ourselves, because a mind of anger causes us to experience suffering. You know, when you're angry, it's a very unpleasant feeling. So, and also, when we cause harm to other people, then we need to understand that we're going to experience the results of that, the effects of that action ourselves at some time in the future. It's called karma. Karma. And so we need to know and understand these things and incorporate them into the way we live our life. Because having met Buddha's teachings, we now have an opportunity to become completely free of problems and suffering. If problems and suffering are within our own mind, then that's the only thing we can have control over. At the moment, we probably don't have very much control, but if we follow Buddha's instructions, then we can gain control over our mind and free ourselves from the causes of suffering. Not just temporarily, but permanently. Once we're free of delusions completely, they never come back. So it's like, we're home free just by following Buddha's teachings. And so we find that even if we take rebirth into next life, then that life will be very fortunate, really good conditions that will enable us to go to the final destination of complete enlightenment. Just like Buddha Shakyamuni, just like my teacher, you see his picture up there, Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. And so that's what's on offer. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but you just have to start. If you want to climb a mountain, you have to take the first step. If you want to become the best person you can be, you have to take the first step of improving your mind, having the best mind you could possibly have. So that's what these classes are all about. All of Buddha's teachings are directed towards improving our mind. And so what we're doing is in this weekly class is just following the structure of all of Buddha's teachings that was given by a great 11th century scholar called Atisha. And he gave a special presentation of all of Buddha's teachings, nothing added, nothing left out, that became known as Lam Rim. So Lam Rim means the lamp for the path to enlightenment. So if we're practicing Lam Rim, then the path to enlightenment is being illuminated for us. And so that's what we do in this series of classes. We're just following the Lam Rim week by week. And so gradually, week by week, we take these instructions to heart, you're ascending a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. So today then, I want to talk a little bit about concentration. We do a little bit of concentration and then talk mainly about wisdom. So there's 3 higher trainings that will enable us to free ourselves from the causes of suffering. Is pure moral discipline, pure concentration, and pure wisdom. They're called higher trainings because they're motivated by the wish to become free of all suffering and its causes. That's what you want, right? Yeah. If I say to you, would you like to have more suffering? I don't think you'd probably say yes. And if you would you like to have less suffering? You'd probably say yes. Would you like to have no suffering? What's the answer to that? Do you like to have a little bit of suffering? Because it seems like, if we develop this understanding, this wisdom, it seems that if we carry on the way we've been going in the past, it seems like we're choosing to experience suffering. Anyway, something for you to think about. So we'll begin with liberating prayer, which you'll find on a red card. Yeah, I was just saying that this is a prayer to recognize the good qualities of Buddha Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism, and developing the wish to develop the same qualities for ourselves so we can free other people from their suffering too.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to the liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn to you, supreme, unchanging friend. I request from the depths of my heart, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you. May all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may holy Dhamma flourish forevermore.
And so we can meditate. We're going to meditate on a simple practice that will help to improve our concentration. It's called counting the breath. So for a few moments rather, just watch the rhythm of your breathing. Imagine that you're seeing your breath as you breathe in and breathe out. And as you're doing this, try to let go of any concerns and thoughts that you have about the outside world. And just allow your whole mind to come inwards. Just to focus your whole mind on the breath. As if your breath is the only thing that's appearing to you. Now this practice is just counting each cycle of inward and outward breath. And we try to be able to count up to 15 without stopping, without losing concentration, or without some other thought appearing in your mind, or without losing the count. But if we lose concentration or lose the count, we just stop, take a couple of breaths, and go back to the beginning and start again at 1. So perhaps at first we can only count to 5 or 6 or something before we lose concentration. It doesn't matter, it's just all that's important is we keep going back to the beginning. And if we keep doing this, then gradually the number of breaths we'll be able to count will increase, and within a fairly short while we'll be able to count up to 15 and then 21 and so on. It may take 2 or 3 weeks of daily practice like this before we can get to 15, but that's okay. Each time we're improving our concentration and creating the cause to improve our concentration. So on the next inward breath, begin to count at 1. So no matter where you are in the count, just take another 4 breaths. So now you can begin to relax your concentration. And when you're ready, you can arise from meditation. So if we improve our concentration, then one important thing will happen, that our wisdom will also increase, because we'll find it easier and easier to develop understanding and experience of Buddha's teachings. So, what do we concentrate on? It's not just our breath all the time. There are many, in our tradition, there are many different meditations. For example, meditate on love, meditate on compassion. We meditate on renunciation, the wish to become free of suffering completely. We meditate on relying upon a spiritual guide. Because the relationship between a spiritual guide or spiritual teacher and the student or disciple is fundamental in Mahayana Buddhism, because essentially from the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, Buddha Shakyamuni's disciples, by following his training and his instructions, their minds were becoming just like his. Is completely free of suffering, and a mind that has extraordinary power to lead others to that same state. And so the disciples become teachers, and they have other disciples, and so it goes on, after generation, right down to the present day. So my teacher, Geshe Kelsang, he was ordained at the age of 8, and he was in a monastery learning all of Buddha's teachings from about 1939 onwards. And then he came to the West in 1977, and he began to give teachings here in the West himself. And so since that time he's developed many followers. Many people are following his teachings. He's written 23 books that shows how to practice. So even though he's not around any longer, his teachings are still around. And so the people who are following his teachings, people who had the good fortune to be able to receive teachings directly from him, but studying with other teachers who followed him, then everyone is kind of being guided along this spiritual path to become a better person, and eventually to become the best we can possibly be. However you think that would look like. If you imagine just abiding in a state of joy and happiness all the time, and every person you think about, every person you meet, you is stimulated to experience joy, because you spontaneously have the wish for this person to be happy, for this person to be free of their suffering. And those minds of love and compassion themselves are the source of our happiness, the source of your happiness. Great 8th century scholar called Shantideva He gave many teachings about how to follow this path to enlightenment. But one of the things he did say is that all the happiness in the world comes from a mind that wishes others to be happy. Yeah, so that's wishing others to be happy is a mind of love. So all your happiness comes from your own mind when you're wishing others to be happy. It doesn't come from watching TV or playing golf or whatever. Playing golf is a true source of suffering. Anybody here tried to play golf? Yes? Oh, you know it's... So there's nothing out there that is a true source of happiness. Nothing out there that is a true source of happiness. It's not the accumulation of wealth. It's not the accumulation of friends. All it is this simple mind wishing others to be happy. And it doesn't matter how much wealth that we have or how much wealth we don't have. If we don't have that mind, we'll never be happy. But if we have that mind, no matter what else we have, it doesn't matter. If we have that mind, then that is our source of happiness. And that's what leads us to attain enlightenment. So, next Thursday evening, we're not meeting here. We're meeting in St. George's Hall. Yeah, you're all going to be there, right? Yes. You can nod your head. So, our general spiritual director, the highest teacher in our whole tradition, and we have something like 1,200 centers throughout the world, in 40 different countries. So our general spiritual director, who's the resident teacher in Manjushri Kadampa Center in the Southern Lakes, the Lake District, she's coming to Liverpool to give a talk on love itself. So you have to be there. There's no question about it. You have to be there. She is an extraordinary, powerful teacher, and her teachings inspire so many people throughout the world. She's a big international teacher. She goes to many different countries, virtually all the time. So we're very fortunate. I think she's only speaking in 2 other places in the UK. The other one is London. So Liverpool and London, that's all. But she teaches at festivals in the UK which are held at Manjushri. So yeah, she's going to talk on love. How this is the real key to finding lasting happiness. Because not only do we have this mind itself, but it's encouraging us to develop other kinds of minds. There's in another text, there's a quotation which says, the path to enlightenment is very simple. Who knew? Normally we think I couldn't possibly become like Buddha Shakyamuni. I couldn't possibly become like Geshe Kelsang Gyatso, or all those others who have gone before. But here, and this comes from ancient wisdom, the path to enlightenment is very simple. All we have to do is stop cherishing and loving ourselves and come to cherish and love only others. cherishing ourselves is the real source of all our problems. Because what do we do when we cherish ourselves? We just wish for our own happiness. Other people's happiness is not so important, which is the complete opposite of love, really. And so we find we end up just using other people as instruments of our own happiness. We don't care, we're not so interested in how they feel. What's more important is that how they make us feel. You ever noticed that? No. You have to think about these things, because this is the complete opposite of what Shantideva was saying. And also, if we take this instruction to heart, we realize we have to turn this mind around. I'm not saying this is easy, but there's many good reasons why we should do this, because it brings many, many good benefits. Every person you ever think of, if you can wish for their happiness, then spontaneously you're creating your own happiness. Even people you think have caused you harm. Yeah? Maybe there's people from your past. Seems like everybody has somebody from their past who, this evil person who caused you harm. If you could wish for their happiness, they would stop being an evil person. They'd stop being the source of your problems whenever you're suffering, whenever you think about them. Because there's no person that exists separately from the way you think about them. There's no person who exists separately from the way in which you think about them. And this is a very special wisdom. And we can show this very clearly, very quickly. Imagine if you were thinking that there's about 15, 16 people in the room right now. We've done this many times. But if you were to imagine, you need to hear it many, many times. If you were to imagine that everyone in the room is thinking about you, does everyone have the same version of you that you have of yourself? No. Why not? If there's a real, truly existent you that exists separately from your mind and anyone else's mind, then everyone with good senses, good eyesight, good hearing, good sense, other senses, they'd be able to identify you. And it'd all be the same identity. But it's not. Because they will all have different visions of you, different versions of you, dependent upon their mind. Some people will think you're amazing. Some people will think you're horrible. Other people will think, oh, you're neither amazing nor horrible. You understand that the way you exist then is dependent upon who's thinking about you. And that is all. And that is all. There's nothing coming from the side of the object. You know, we talk in the West about objective reality. As if there's everything, all the objects that exist in the world are out there. The mind is here, I'm here, and all the other objects and persons are out there. So it's as if my job is to come to know all the objects and the persons so I can control them and manipulate them to create the real conditions that suit me for my happiness and my freedom from inconvenience. But what if that's not true? What if the world is not like that? What if the world, as we saw it just a second ago, the world that appears to me is dependent upon how I view whatever's appearing? Like when you have a dream, you wake up after your dream, and maybe it was a pleasant dream. You found yourself on a beach in the Seychelles or something, and it's having a wonderful experience. But you wake up and there's no sand in your room, and you realize it was just a dream, it wasn't real. There's no Seychelles beach in your room. It was just an appearance to your dreaming mind that arose, who knows why? Probably because you had some karmic potentials to have this appear in your dreaming mind. In reality, it's the same when we're so-called awake. You know, everything is just appearances to our mind. And those appearances those appearances exist, but they exist only inside our mind. If the objects that appear to me really and truly existed, we would be able to find them if you search. But you find that when you search for these objects that you see so clearly, you don't find them. It's really weird. It seems that they're there, but you can't find them. You can do an experiment about this on yourself. You know, you think that yourself really exists. Yeah. So if you think that yourself really exists in the way you normally see it, you'd be able to find it if you search for it. So point to yourself. Point to the self that you normally see. Some of you have done this many times, but you still don't get it. So what do we do when we try and point to ourselves? We do something like this, as if the self is here. But what I'm pointing to is not myself. It's part of myself, my chest, my shoulder, my arm, my leg, my torso, my head. These are all non-selves. None of these things is myself. I cannot point to anything here that is myself. And when we come to realize that this self that I normally see is unfindable. If something cannot be found, something you thought really existed, and then when you search extensively in every possible location, there's one more location, maybe myself exists separately from all the parts of my body or mind. But that's just a nonsense. You can't have a self. Your self does not appear separately from all the aspects of your body or mind. So you can't find the self that you normally treasure so much. And you come to realize that it's just like an empty box. That concept of self is just like an empty box. There's nothing in it. And yet it's just an appearance. The appearance exists, the truly existent person does not exist. Now that applies not just to persons. You can think of the person next to you. If you try and find that, I don't suggest you poke them, but if you were to ask yourself, you would deconstruct mentally the person sitting next to you, you can never find their self. You can find bits of them that are not the self, but you can never find their self. So it applies not only to oneself, it applies to other people's selves as well. So, what happens to all the people sitting in this room? How do they exist then? Are they singular, solid entities? They might feel like that if you try and touch them, but touch is an aspect of mind also. Touch is just an appearance to mind. And so everything that we feel is appearing to our sense awarenesses doesn't truly exist. It exists simply as appearances to mind. Now I'm saying these appearances still exist. But then we have to ask ourselves, there's a further question. What then is the difference between one person appearing to me and another person appearing to me? Maybe this one previously I liked. I saw them as a friend, and this one I saw them as an enemy because they made me feel bad or they did some harm to me. So what's the real difference between them? If I were to search in either of these cases, I wouldn't be able to find them. I wouldn't be able to find themselves. But it's still appearing to me. And the fact that they're both simply appearances means, in essence, there is no difference. They're just appearances. Appearances, aspects of our mind. And if they appear differently, it's only because of my mind, my preferences. I prefer this one to that one. And that is all. That's the only difference between them. And that preference is coming from my mind. So what's the basis for me having these preferences? How does having these preferences serve me? It actually, if I have these biased preferences, it stops me from finding real happiness. Because it's always going to be difficult to wish this person to be happy. I wish this one to be happy because I want them to keep making me happy. But if I come to understand that in reality there's no difference between these two people, and there's no justification for me viewing them separately and differently, then it becomes possible for me to be loving and kind to both of them. And so once we begin to realize that, we just apply it to everyone else. We realize it becomes possible and feasible and productive to be able to be loving and kind and compassionate towards anyone who's appearing to our mind. Isn't that cool? In just one click, your mind can open up to be able to be loving towards everyone you ever think about or meet. And all those horrible people from your past, they stop being horrible. Because you realize it's only your mind that's horrible. And the good thing is, we can change our mind. Because beginning to think in this way, every time we we find ourselves being able to wish someone to be happy, to be able to wish someone to be free of their problems, it affects our own mind. And we create our own happiness and our own sense of peace and freedom from suffering within our own mind, simply by following these instructions to become more loving, to allow ourselves to develop compassion for everyone else. Isn't that cool? I mean, and it's definitely possible. Yeah. But you begin to understand it's this mind of wisdom that will just cut through all the root of all our delusions, our jealousy, our uncontrolled desire, our anger, our deluded pride and arrogance. Because none of these delusions, these dysfunctional ways of thinking, can survive once we begin to realize this wisdom, realizing emptiness. I think this is the main reason why Buddhism has this extraordinary reputation of just being peaceful all the time. It's because this wisdom just cuts through all the delusions which themselves are the cause of all our aggression and lack of peace. So join the club. So, well, maybe we should meditate on wisdom then. Maybe we should find this experience of emptiness for ourselves. So again, sit in good meditation posture. What we meditate on is the emptiness of ourself, the unfindability of ourself. So bring to mind an image of the self that you normally see or think about, that you hold dear, that you cherish, that you promote, that you protect from problems and difficulties. Often it's quite difficult to find this image of yourself, but it appears most clearly when we have an extreme of emotion, like fear, or like elation. You suddenly heard good news and you feel really excited because you feel this news is going to give you great good fortune. Or you can use the experience of fear. You just imagine that the ground underneath you is opening up and you're falling into a great crevasse. So try to have a clear image of yourself. And you realize it's something to do with your physical form. But also something to do with your mind, your relationships with other people, your relationships with place, your relationships with the things that you enjoy. your past history, your accumulation of knowledge and understanding. And all of those goes into just one single entity. When we think of self, we're not thinking of something that's comprised of different components. We're just thinking one single entity that just stands on its own, unaffected by anything else, and not affecting anything else. There's just me, just who I am. If you existed like that, we would be able to find you if we searched in every possible location. So first we identify where we should look. We should look for yourself within the body, within the mind, or separate from body and mind, a self that somehow exists separately from body and mind. So when we begin by searching within the body, we can easily see there's no single part of your body that is yourself. Some people would say, well, it's all the parts put together that is yourself. But the collection of all these individual parts is just a collection of non-selves. Your skin is not yourself. Your hair is not yourself. Your eyes, not yourself. Your inner organs, not yourself. So all of these are just a collection of non-selves. So when people say, well, it's the collection that is yourself, they're implying that there is a specific thing called a collection. But if we take away all of the parts, there's no collection that remains. The collection is just a group or a number of things. So we cannot say that the self is either one of the parts or the collection of parts. And also we say, my body. When we say my body, we're implying that our self is the owner of our body. And the owner and the thing that is owned can never be the same. Similarly with our mind, we often say, I made up my mind, I changed my mind, again implying that our self is the owner of our mind, and mind is the thing that is owned, and they can never be the same. And then again, some people will say, well, it's the combination of body and mind that is yourself. But again, these two things are non-selves. And two things that are not another thing, just because you put them together, they don't become the other thing. So it's not the collection of body and mind either. It's the only place left to look is for a self that somehow exists separately from body and mind. But you cannot think of yourself without either your body or your mind appearing at the same time. so we've searched in every possible location, and we have not found the self that we normally see, that we treasure so much, that we protect so much, that we promote so much. All we have found is that that self is unfindable. That self we normally see is unfindable. So if you turn your mind back to the image of yourself that you had at the beginning, and you realize that self is unfindable, therefore it doesn't exist. If it had existed, we could have found it, but we didn't find it, so it doesn't exist. And when we come to that conclusion, that image of yourself begins to dissolve into empty space. It just dissolves away until there's almost just like a boundary of light remaining. And then even the boundary disappears into space, so that all that is left is empty space. Think this empty space, this emptiness, is the only true nature of me. My lack of existing separately from my mind. My lack of existing inherently from my own side. So place your mind on the emptiness of you. Thinking this is the ultimate nature of me. Some people, when they meditate on the emptiness of themselves, experience great joy, as if there is a new blank slate to write on. Sometimes people experience fear as if nothing is true. Both experiences are valid. And finally, you can ask yourself the question, who is meditating on the emptiness of myself. Who is it who is meditating on the emptiness of myself? Perhaps you may realize the answer is just name. And ask yourself, what lies behind my name? If the self I normally see cannot be found, so you can slowly begin to relax your concentration. When you're ready, you can arise from meditation. And don't worry, you will reappear again. So this is wisdom. We begin to realize that although things appear, although persons appear, although self appears, his nature, his ultimate nature is emptiness. And this applies not just to animate phenomena, it applies to inanimate phenomena, like mountains. Normally we think of mountains as just single entity, unchanging. But a mountain is composed of many different things: bushes, snow, ice, birds, insects, and so on. There's no mountain separate from all these parts. You try and find a mountain, you can point to many different things, but you can't point to mountain. Same with oceans, same with continents, same with the whole planet Earth. We come to realize these are all just mental constructs that we've learned. And yet, we think that they come with great meaning from their own side, but they don't. It's our mind that imposes meaning upon everything. So the thing, once you realize this, all you have to do is impose different meanings on things, instead of viewing people as strangers, unworthy of your attention. They're potential persons that if you develop minds of love towards them, then your own mind of happiness will arise. So you change the meaning of things just by changing your mind. Okay. So when we're out of meditation, we have to keep thinking about this. If we're really going to be able to come to this realization and incorporate it into how we normally think in our daily life. So what we can do is every situation we find ourselves in, just think, this is just like a dream. If it's just like a dream, you don't have to worry about it. Because it's not real. It's just something appearing to your waking mind. And so you can relax and be happy and peaceful and choose to be loving and compassionate. Okay, you can do this, right? Yes. You can try, just try. Geshe-Kelsang, that's all he ever says, just try. But the thing is, if we try, we'll discover. Okay? I mean, you can choose for yourself. The Buddha always said, don't do what I say just because it's me who's saying it. Check it out for yourself. If it works for you, then great. Shall we finish? Does anyone have any questions you would like to ask? Any comments? Well, good. Okay, thank you so much.